For unvaccinated, we are looking at a winter of severe illness and death.
What did you say?
For unvaccinated, we are looking at a winter of severe illness and death.
In the words of Ronald Reagan, well, there he goes again. In a White House-sponsored COVID update on Friday, the director of the CDC, along with Dr. Fauci, gave some statements and some updates, and then, of course, fielded questions through a virtual Zoom-style conference. One of the questions that was asked specifically to Dr. Fauci was about the efficacy of the vaccinations, and are we going to have to start considering people not fully vaccinated if they have not received the booster? And of course, he went into his usual doublespeak, because one thing that he loves to do is CYA himself continually. 2 days ago, he basically downplayed the idea of having to consider someone being fully vaccinated only once they had received the booster. But then on Friday, he basically said, it's still on the table and we're looking into it, because again, the cases are high. What's not being talked about, what's not being dealt with, is the fact that over a year ago, we weren't so much focused on cases, we were focused on deaths. And what they will not talk about is the fact that the death rate has absolutely plummeted, as has hospitalizations of COVID. Now, as they talk about widespread, and now we've got Democratic governors and mayors springing back into action with loon policies. We have the governor of New York until January 15th has put her entire state on a mask mandate. Doesn't matter if you live in a sparsely populated area of rural New York where there are virtually no cases. It doesn't matter. Everybody is going to mask up. You have the city of New York, which has led the way for other municipalities in this country to require proof of vaccination to get into indoor venues, dining, theaters, gyms, shows, etc. The Radio City Music Hall Rockettes have canceled the rest of their Christmas programs for the season. And some people had tickets going into this weekend and the next week because they like to see that show a little closer to the actual Christmas holiday, and they'll get a refund and a promise that we'll be back in 2022. And again, as we ramp all of this up again, Governor DeWine over in Ohio has just announced that on Monday he'll be bringing in the National Guard to set up mobile hospitals. Really? What is the National Guard going to do? Shoot Omicron? I mean, the reason there is a problem with hospitalization availability in places like New York, because they had a mandate in place that if frontline workers, the people who a year ago we called heroes, did not receive vaccination, they would be let go. And New York and the numbers vary, between 50 and 74,000 frontline workers, healthcare providers, were let go. The reason that hospital availability is difficult right now is not so much about people being hospitalized through the spread of a virus as much as it is there's just not enough workers to take care of them. There's just not enough space, not enough open floors in hospitals. In other words, the beds are there, but the floors themselves are closed because there's not enough staff to man those wings. Because the governor's plan was she was going to bring in, after letting go all of these healthcare workers, going to bring in the National Guard, to which even the National Guard said, hold it, time out. First of all, we're not even requiring any of our people to be fully vaccinated until June of 2022. And the vast majority of our so-called medical personnel within the National Guard, basically they're EMTs. Basically, they know how to do first aid. We have to borrow from the civilian population medical workers and nurses when we are called into action and medical attention is required. Bum, ba-dum, bum. The state of New York started advertising for retired nurses to come out of retirement. Gee, retired nurses, that would imply they are old and in that high risk category for the virus. They were advertising medical staffing to come in from other states and come join the New York team, all because they enacted a policy that, to be quite honest, didn't follow the science. And again, I have to say, for full disclosure here, so we don't get in trouble with the powers that be at YouTube, for full disclosure here, we have vaccines that are available that you can avail yourself to, that from what they tell us, it will greatly reduce your risk for COVID, certainly will reduce your risk for hospitalization and or possible death. Now, Omicron, which has Dr. Fauci and President Biden sounding the alarm and talking about the winter of death. Sounds like a great movie, doesn't it? The Winter of Death. Sprang out of Africa from people, and it doesn't get talked about a lot, were vaccinated. Double vax, and in one case, triple vax, means they had 2 shots of the vaccination or the vaccine and a booster. So, Fauci having to talk about, we're going to have to keep doing this every 9 months, but, we're out ahead of this. And President Biden, in that little clip that I played at the beginning, went on to say that Omicron is spreading, but it's much more controlled here in the U.S. because we were on it when other places weren't. Well, wait a minute. You have countries like Israel that have 90+% of their population is inoculated, as are other countries. And the way they're handling it is the lockdown of the unvaccinated, places like Austria. So let me get this straight. You can go to work in a restaurant in Austria. This is happening right now. You can go to work if you're unvaccinated. You can work in a restaurant, but as soon as you clock out, you're not allowed to sit down at a table in the same restaurant where you were just serving people. You're not allowed to then sit down and have a meal yourself after you've clocked out. You must go home. World leaders not realize that this is kind of happening in a setting, in a place that has a history for this sort of thing, pitting the populace against groups of people that they deem unclean and carrier of disease. I think they refer to them as vermin, and human rats is a little buzz phrase they were throwing around back in the 1930s and 40s. And here we are again. History repeating itself. And as other national leaders, including our own president, sit quietly by, one has to ask, if they're not speaking out against this, you wonder, are they looking at this thinking, well, you know what? If Austria can pull this off, could we try that here? Now, I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I'm just making an observation and asking a question out loud. Oregon is under an endless, basically mask forever, but yet there are some Democrats, and I can't say they've seen the light as much as perhaps maybe they understand the realization that the people have had enough. Michigan. Now, everyone knows that the governor of Michigan was not under any stretch of the imagination a supporter of Donald Trump, had some of the strictest lockdowns and mandates in the country. But even she was smart enough to realize that a mandate on employers to vaccinate would absolutely crush, kill, and destroy the economy. And her economy has already been pretty crushed by some of her other insane ideas. And now we have an appeals court that has stepped in and said, yes, absolutely, that the vaccine mandate that the president is requiring and wants OSHA to enforce on businesses of 100+ employees can go forward. Now remember, 2 courts stepped in and said, no, nay. First of all, if this is really that big a deal, why is it only employers with 100 people? What? If they only have 99 people, somehow they're magically protected? And why did you wait 90 days to enforce this if it's so-called, quote, an emergency of catastrophic consequences. This is being teed up to end up with the Supreme Court. But of course, this Obama-appointed judge had this to say. Recognizing that the old normal is just not going to return, employers and employees have sought new models for a workplace that will protect the safety and health of employees who earn their living there. In the need for guidance on how to protect their employees from COVID-19 transmission while reopening businesses, employers have turned to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. Well, they've only done that by quote-unquote mandate, and even OSHA has said they really don't want to enforce this. Two courts stepped in and said, no, nay, and now that this appeals court has said, oh, yes, you will, OSHA's really saying, you know what, let's let the Supreme Court make a final decision on this. The problem with all of this back and forth mixed messaging and start and stop, there are some people in our country that really think, and it's because of the doublespeak and the confusion that comes from people like Dr. Fauci, that somehow we are going to, quote, get to COVID zero. And what has to finally happen is from the president to Fauci to everyone, just step up to the plate and say, coronavirus is here, it is here to stay, and we have to, like with other health risks, figure out how to live with it. We need to stay open, stay back to work. You've got vaccines. We have got other treatments now available. And as I said earlier, at some point, and I like to believe within the next year or so, you are going to see these pharmaceutical companies, once they've made their an initial financial benefit from mass inoculation and boosters, at the end of the day, they're about business, which means they're about money. So you're going to start seeing over-the-counter COVID treatment. You'll walk into any Walgreens, CVS, and in the same aisle where they've got the Coldies and the Hall's cough drops and the Theraflu, you're going to see COVID drops and whatever else. It will all be readily available. At some point, we have to acknowledge that this idea that this is simply about, quote unquote, we're going to beat this thing. No, this thing is here. It's a virus. And as every virus has always worked, and this is science, this is the real science, the way viruses work. They mutate. Each mutation spreads faster than the last mutation, but each time it mutates, it actually weakens itself. And that is exactly what we're seeing with Omicron. Now, I'm going to tell you something that I think is happening that you don't really hear much being talked about. I think a lot of people have contracted the virus and have just stayed home. They haven't bothered to call a doctor. They haven't bothered to go to an emergency room. They haven't bothered to be officially checked. Why? Because they are terrified that everything will be taken away from them, that somehow they'll end up where they don't want to be and in a hospital and undergoing whatever. And so a lot of people realize, you know what, I can't taste, I can't smell, I've got symptoms. I'm just going to stay home and not tell anybody. I'm under the weather. And they'll just lay low for a couple of weeks. That's happening. And this virus is here, just like the flu, just like bronchitis, just like pneumonia. We need to talk about things that people can do to boost their own immunity and to be ready for it if and when it finally comes to them. Again, there's never any talk about boosting your vitamin D levels. I have been screaming that since February of 2020. Get your vitamin D3 in you. Take some elderberry extract. It's a wonderful natural immune enhancer. No, we're not making any medical predictions here that it is a cure or it is a guaranteed protector. But what it does is it boosts your immunity and it gives you a fighting chance, whether it's cold, the flu, bronchitis, whatever. If your immune system is engaged, it helps you naturally fight an infection. Seek out the medical attention that you believe that you need, but do some things that you can strengthen your own immunity. That is just common sense, and the fact that Dr. Fauci and the medical experts that be never address that absolutely infuriates me to no end. And then you see people, when we hear this Omicron, which I've said before sounds like, the villain in a Transformers movie. Be careful. Here comes Omicron. You got that certain part of our population, they are never going to be normal again. They are going to freak out over everything. And here we see them outside wearing the hat. Again, you're outside, fresh air, plenty of ventilation. The hat there is basically useless. But what I really crack up is when I see them alone in their car. Are you going to catch it from yourself? I mean, give me a break. You're alone in your car. I'm sorry, but that makes about as much sense as going to bed by yourself and wearing a condom. So as we get into now the fostering of more lunacy, and I know some of you are upset that I just said what I said. You're a pastor. You're not supposed to talk like that. You're supposed to love everybody. I'm sorry, they're morons, and I am showing love. I love to point out when someone is an actual moron because I can't fix stupid. I'm helping. Dr. Francis Collins, Dr. Fauci's boss, is retiring this week, and it's good. That'll spare us from having to watch any more of his songs. He loves to. Now, this is the guy, Fauci's boss over there at the National Institute of Health. This is the guy that tells Fauci what to do. This is the guy that basically signs Fauci's paycheck at almost $500,000 a year. He can't seem to go online without picking up his guitar and taking an old 60s hippie tune and redoing the lyrics for everything from pneumonia to, of course, COVID.
Somewhere past the pandemic, when we're free, there's a life I remember, full of activity. Somewhere past the pandemic, no quarantine. We'll all stay well and healthy, thanks to a safe vaccine. Thank God these shots came very fast, so all my fears are now behind me. My family now can leave our home, visit stores and freely roam. Masks off, finally. Somewhere past the pandemic, life will resume. We'll all complain about the traffic, forgetting how we hated Zoom. Somewhere past the pandemic, I'll hug my friends and thank the science and people that brought the pandemic's end.
Shut up! All I can say is thank God he's retiring and we can be spared from any more of these cringe videos, which when this one broke this past week, even the liberals on Twitter were like, it was just an absolute cringe alert. This is the guy that's supposed to be keeping his eye on Dr. Fauci. Is that maybe why the fact that Fauci was funding gain of function over in Wuhan kind of missed this guy's watchful eye? You look at that and you think, This guy isn't Fauci's boss. This guy just simply sits there, collects a paycheck, pretends to be the boss, and Fauci actually sets the agenda. This guy isn't overseeing anything that Fauci did. Anything that Fauci told him, he just went along with hook, line, and sinker. These are the people making decisions for us. Now, you need to do for you and your family what you feel is in their best interest. You know, we used to practice that in this country. We used to give people information, not political spin. We used to give them what they needed to weigh it out, logic it through, and make the decision that was best for them. But of course, now we're not allowed to do that. But even woke liberals are waking up.
Well, for a little while there, it seemed like things were finally calming down. Even the mentally ill folks in charge of the city of Washington, D.C. finally rescinded their mask mandate. Mask wearing outside in D.C., a metric that I use for the paranoia level of the average upper middle class lib, it was declining. I thought perhaps we would get to the other side of this thing. I, of course, should have known better because it was just 2 days later that the Omicron panic started. Omicron is in New York. Omicron is in California. Omicron and a guy who was triple vaxxed. Oh my God. That was the internal media diet for many of the people, and predictably, the science, the logic, and the insanity. It has now come right back so swiftly that I honestly feel like I'm losing my mind. Sure, we may not have lockdowns, but we do have a paranoid elite that is destroying the lives of young people, of consumers, and of everyday citizens at exactly the time when we need to collectively realize this is never going away. The chief offender is once again the state of California, which has preempted all local regulations and is instituting a statewide mask mandate indoors that applies not only to your business, but listen to this. In the case of Santa Cruz, California, requires, quote, masks must be worn in private settings, including your home, when non-household members are present. That is a real sentence that I just read from the order of Santa Cruz, California. And the worst part is what brought it back in the first place. The impetus, according to the state's Secretary of Health and Human Services, was a large increase in the number of coronavirus cases. Note, not deaths, not hospitalizations, cases. To the extent that those two are related, it is predominantly amongst people who have not had the vaccine or do not have access to early intervention therapeutics. So once again, case count is the only thing that these people are focusing on, and they are thus setting a standard that there is no permanent return to normal. I can't emphasize this enough. There will always be COVID cases in America. Not just America, worldwide. You need to accept this. This thing is literally in deer now. It's in animals. You could eradicate it right now in all humans. It would still be mutating and jumping in the future. It's okay, because from what we see and continue to see, all variants have not jumped the vaccine in terms of hospitalization or death, or therapeutics' ability to reduce hospitalization and deaths from COVID. Therefore, the cases themselves only matter insofar as they actually kill people, and if they do kill people who want to risk it, well, that's on them, not on the rest of us. And yet, sensible mindset is being embraced by not only the largest state by population in the union, but by worse to institutions that are not even accountable to Democrats, to democratic impulse. Private institutions with massive sway over American cultural life have caught the same mind disease as the public health bureaucrats, and they are setting up a future where COVID theater will literally stay here forever. You don't believe me? Take a look at the wealthiest corporation in the United States. Apple is reinstating a mask mandate. All U.S. stores, limiting store occupancy. Till when? That's up to Apple. Soon, many large retail corporations will follow suit, I guarantee you. It won't even matter if the government in your area does have a mask mandate. The private businesses will enforce the policy of the mentally ill. But it's actually worse than Apple. The places where I actually start to lose it are the universities, where I hear tales of true insanity. College students thrust into chaos with sporadic testing, people narking on each other for going to parties, and a bureaucracy accountable to no one that revels in enforcing mandates with no scientific backing. George Washington University, where I went to undergraduate, here in the DC, is requiring booster shots for its entire student population, or they will not be eligible eligible to register for summer or fall semester on campus. Zero consideration of whether they need one or not, do they have COVID already on top of their vaccine. Doesn't matter. Considering that one of the first cases of Omicron was even caught by somebody who was boosted, is there zero evidence right now that that is even going to stop cases and transmission broadly? So once again, where does this end? GW is not the only offender. Take a look at Cornell, which is shutting down its entire campus and moving to a, quote, alert level red after rapid spread of COVID among students. Now, you know what Cornell doesn't mention in their cancellation? They already have a vaccine mandate. Every single one of those students is vaccinated. In addition to being young, they have a minuscule chance of death or illness, and so do all of their employees who also are vaccinated. This is a moral panic. You can tell me I'm cherry picking, but I'm not a fool. I saw social justice ideology ripple through universities in the 2010s to emerge at the state, Hollywood, and media level by 2017. Now I see COVID mania institutionalized at the top universities and corporations. Directional power in elite liberalism starts with the bureaucratic mindset, and from there ripples out to all of our lives. And that's why I know maybe I sound a little crazy, but honestly, I'm fed up. I've had enough, not just for myself, but watching young people who I care about have their entire lives destroyed by people with little to lose and who are basing their decisions on emotion and have been for some time. Is there a fix to this? I honestly cannot tell you. It's not like you can vote out the president of Cornell or GW or the CEO of Apple. Those people are accountable only to their peers to the extent that they're accountable at all. But I know one thing they absolutely cannot resist is a crushing resistance to this nonsense. I don't know what that looks like. Most people begrudgingly comply because they're just trying to get by in life. I'm still trying to figure it out too. All I know is that this cannot stand. It's got to break eventually. If the elites want to remain in power, they better listen now before somebody comes along and actually smashes it all.
Well, that's it for this rant. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, smack the bell, and click the word all to get notification of my next rant.